It was the turning point of the Second World War. June 6, 1944, D-Day. More than 3 million soldiers stood ready across Europe. Thousands of ships, aircraft, and tanks waited in coordinated silence. When dawn broke over the English Channel, the largest amphibious invasion in human history began. Its objective was simple in words, impossible in execution: liberate Europe from Nazi control. For the Allies, the Normandy landings were the beginning of victory. For thousands of young men, it was a descent into chaos. And for one German soldier, it became an unwanted place in history. His name was Hinrich Severloh, a 20-year-old farm boy from Lower Saxony, whose actions on that single morning turned Omaha Beach into one of the deadliest stretches of sand on Earth. By 1944, Europe had been at war for almost 5 years. Nazi Germany controlled most of the continent. France had fallen. The Low Countries were occupied. The Soviet Union was still locked in a brutal struggle on the Eastern Front. The Allies had pushed from North Africa into Italy, but the war could not be won without opening a Western Front. The only way to defeat Hitler was to land in France and fight their way toward Germany itself. The invasion was codenamed Operation Overlord. Months of planning, deception, and build-up followed. Factories in Britain worked day and night. Airfields filled with transport planes. Harbors brimmed with landing craft. Soldiers trained relentlessly on the British coast, waiting for the order that would send them across the Channel. On the opposite side, the Germans prepared too. Adolf Hitler ordered the construction of the Atlantic Wall, a chain of bunkers, minefields, and artillery positions stretching from Norway to Spain. His purpose was to make any Allied landing impossible. The man overseeing those defenses was Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. He had fought the British in North Africa and understood the Allies' capabilities. Rommel warned that the invasion had to be stopped on the beaches themselves. If the Allies gained a foothold, Germany's fate would be sealed. Along the coast of Normandy, construction teams poured concrete, installed gun emplacements, and planted millions of mines. Among the defensive strongpoints was a position known as Widerstandsnest 62, Resistance Nest 62, overlooking a stretch of sand the Allies would later call Omaha Beach. And in that position, manning a machine gun that would become infamous, stood a young private named Hinrich Severloh. Hinrich Severloh was born in 1923 in Metzingen, a quiet farming town in Lower Saxony. He grew up tending animals and fields, far removed from the political fever spreading through Germany. His life was simple, his ambitions modest. At 18, he was drafted into the Wehrmacht like millions of young Germans before him. His early service was unremarkable. During training, a careless remark about an officer's cooking landed him in disciplinary punishment. Weeks of grueling physical labor in winter. The ordeal left him sick and hospitalized with severe tonsillitis. After months of recovery, he returned home to the farm. But Germany's need for men was growing desperate. In 1943, he was recalled and assigned to the 352nd Infantry Division, newly reformed and stationed in occupied France. The 352nd was not an elite unit. It was a patchwork of young recruits and veterans pulled from the Eastern Front. Severloh was neither ambitious nor political. Like many soldiers of the late war, he obeyed out of habit and survival, not conviction. By early 1944, he found himself at Colleville-sur-Mer, manning the defenses of WN-62. His weapon was the MG-42, one of the deadliest machine guns ever built, a weapon capable of firing over 1,200 rounds per minute. The Allies called it Hitler's buzzsaw. Severloh's immediate commander was Oberleutnant Bernhard Furking, a schoolteacher in civilian life. Furking was strict but fair, and his leadership earned the respect of his men. For Severloh, Furking became both superior and friend, a relationship that would bind them through the hell to come. Spring 1944 passed in uneasy quiet. German intelligence expected an invasion, but believed it would strike at Calais, not Normandy. The troops at Omaha felt distant from the war's front lines. They drilled, maintained weapons, and watched the sea. Still, rumors spread. Allied air raids intensified. Trains carried more and more troops toward the coast. Rommel himself inspected the beaches, urging his men to prepare for anything. Under his orders, obstacles were planted in the surf to tear open landing craft. Mines were buried in the sand. Barbed wire coiled around trenches. From Severloh's position atop the bluff, the view was commanding. The beach stretched for kilometers, flat, open, and defenseless. His MG-42 covered a field of fire that crossed directly with another gun on the right flank. Together, they formed a deadly web. If the enemy came ashore, there would be nowhere to hide. On the evening of June 5th, the men of WN-62 settled in as usual. The wind was cold. The channel was calm. They could not see the massive Allied fleet assembling beyond the horizon. Thousands of ships waiting for dawn. Shortly after midnight, the sky filled with sound. Engines, hundreds of them. Allied aircraft thundered overhead, dropping thousands of paratroopers behind German lines. The defenders of WN-62 could do nothing but watch tracers flicker in the distance. Then came the naval bombardment. Before dawn, Allied battleships opened fire. The ground shook violently. Shells screamed through the air and exploded across the coast. Concrete bunkers quaked. Dust filled the air. Severloh later said he thought no one could survive such a storm. But when the shelling stopped, the defenders were still alive. They reloaded their weapons, checked their sights, and waited. As the first light of morning spread across the horizon, the sea came alive. Over 5,000 ships stretched from one end of the horizon to the other, warships, transports, landing craft, all converging on Normandy. On board them were 156,000 men. 34,000 Americans were heading straight for Omaha Beach. At 6:30 a.m., the first landing craft lowered their ramps. Men of the U.S. 1st Infantry Division stepped into waist-high water, weighed down by equipment, rifles clutched in shaking hands. Many believed the German defenses had been obliterated by bombing. They were wrong. From his bunker high above, Hinrich Severloh saw them advancing. He took a deep breath, steadied his MG-42, and opened fire. The MG-42's distinct metallic shriek ripped through the morning air. Its rate of fire was so fast that individual shots blurred into a single tearing sound. The first burst struck the waterline. Soldiers fell instantly. Others dove for cover, but there was none. Bullets tore through waves and bodies alike. Within minutes, the beach was chaos. Men shouting, crawling, disappearing beneath the surf. Severloh's position commanded a perfect field of fire. He aimed deliberately, conserving ammunition, shifting targets from one cluster of troops to another. When belts ran dry, his loader fed in new ones. The gun smoked and trembled. For hour after hour, the pattern repeated. Fire, reload, fire again. According to his later account, Severloh fired over 12,000 machine gun rounds and 400 rifle shots that day. He changed ammunition belts nearly 50 times. All along the beach, similar scenes unfolded. Mortars exploded. Artillery shells crashed into landing craft. Men drowned under the weight of their own gear. By 8 a.m., the sea near Omaha had turned red. Despite the horror, the Americans kept coming. New waves landed. Engineers blew gaps in obstacles. Officers rallied survivors. Inch by inch, the tide pushed forward. From WN-62, Severloh could see them closing in, crawling through smoke and shrapnel. His gun grew too hot to touch. His shoulder was bruised raw. But he kept firing. The beach became a vision of hell. Bodies lay scattered among burning wreckage. The air reeked of smoke, seawater, and blood. By midday, Severloh was nearly alone. Other positions in WN-62 had been destroyed or abandoned. Naval guns had silenced most of the defenders. His was one of the few machine guns still active on the bluff. Each shot was mechanical now, reflex survival. He later recalled one moment in particular. An American soldier crouched behind a steel obstacle, exposed but trying to crawl forward. Severloh switched to his rifle and fired once. The man fell. That single image, he said, haunted him more than all the rest. By early afternoon, Allied tanks and artillery found their range. Shells slammed into WN-62. The ground erupted in fountains of dirt and flame. Trenches collapsed. Bunkers filled with dust. A fragment struck Severloh in the face, wounding him. His commander, Lieutenant Firking, ordered what was left of the garrison to withdraw inland. Their ammunition was almost gone. The position could not hold. After nearly 9 hours of continuous combat, Severloh abandoned his gun. He and a handful of survivors retreated through the shattered countryside. Omaha Beach, once impregnable, now belonged to the Allies. By nightfall, over 2,400 American casualties lay on that 5-mile stretch of sand, the highest toll of any D-Day beach. Many historians believe hundreds of those fell to Severloh's gun alone. The Germans' defense had been fierce, but the invasion had succeeded. The door to Europe was open. The next morning, the remnants of the 352nd Division were surrounded. Severloh and his comrades surrendered to troops of the U.S. 1st Division, the same soldiers he had fired upon the previous day. He was exhausted, deafened, and barely conscious. Lieutenant Firking reportedly told him, "You've probably killed 1,000 Americans today." For Severloh, the words were not praise. They were a curse. He was taken prisoner, first to England, then shipped to the United States with thousands of other POWs. For nearly 3 years he lived behind barbed wire, far from home, working on farms and in camps. The war in Europe ended in 1945, but for Severloh, another battle had only begun. When he returned to Germany in 1947, his homeland was in ruins. Cities were destroyed, families scattered, the nation divided. He went back to his family farm and resumed a life of quiet labor. But the war followed him everywhere. He rarely spoke about Omaha Beach. Not to neighbors, not to fellow veterans. The only person who heard his story was his wife. To others, he was simply a farmer. Inside, he carried the weight of June 6th forever. He remembered the sound of the MG-42, the sight of the beach, the faces of men he had never known. Every time he saw a newsreel or a photograph of Normandy, the memories returned. Not as pride, but as guilt. For decades, Hinrich Severloh kept his story to himself. Then, in the 1960s, he began revisiting Normandy. Quietly at first, standing among the graves, walking the beaches where he had once fought. Over time, he met with American veterans. Some had landed at Omaha that day. Their conversations were measured, sometimes emotional, but never hostile. Many of them wanted to understand how anyone could have survived those hours on either side of the gun. Encouraged by historians, Severloh agreed to tell his account publicly. In 2000, he published a memoir titled WN62, A German Soldier's Memories of Omaha Beach. In it, he described firing over 12,000 rounds from his MG-42 and about 400 from his rifle. If accurate, he may have caused between 800 and 1,000 casualties. The claim sparked controversy. Some historians argued that the number was exaggerated, that no single gunner could inflict such devastation in the confusion of battle. Others pointed to surviving records and topography, noting that WN62 had indeed dominated the deadliest sector of Omaha. The debate continues to this day. British newspapers labeled him the Beast of Omaha. The nickname stuck, but it never fit the man himself. Severloh insisted he had never taken pleasure in killing. He described the event not as heroism, but as survival, a mechanical act driven by fear and training. "If I hadn't fired," he once said, "I would have been killed myself." He lived with that paradox for the rest of his life. The duty of a soldier versus the morality of the man. Hinrich Severloh died in 2006, at the age of 82. His grave lies quietly in Germany, far from the beaches of Normandy. No monuments mark his name. No medals commemorate his deeds. Only the history books remember him, and even there, uneasily. His story is woven into the larger tapestry of D-Day, a day that marked the beginning of Europe's liberation and the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The cost of that day was immense. By nightfall, more than 4,400 Allied soldiers were dead. Thousands more wounded or missing. For the Germans, the losses were heavy too. But numbers tell only part of the story. What endured was the scale of human endurance and tragedy. At the Normandy American Cemetery above Omaha Beach, 9,387 white crosses and stars of David mark the resting places of those who fell. Many of them died within the field of fire of WN62. Many may have fallen under the bullets of a frightened 20-year-old farm boy who never asked to be there. Today, Omaha Beach is peaceful. Waves roll gently over the same sand once soaked in blood. Tourists walk the cliffs, unaware of the sheer volume of fire that once swept this ground. The bunkers of WN62 still stand. Their concrete is scarred but intact. Inside, rusted metal and empty casings remain, mute witnesses to one of history's most violent mornings. For historians, Severloh's story raises a simple but haunting question. What happens when duty and conscience collide? For Severloh, there was never a clear answer. He lived not as a villain or a hero, but as a reminder of war's inescapable humanity, that behind every statistic lies a man who pulled a trigger and who must live with what followed. When the guns finally fell silent, history recorded the triumph of D-Day, but for those who fought on both sides, the battle never truly ended. And in that silence that followed Omaha Beach, one man's story endures as a testament to the price of war, a reminder that even victory carries its ghosts.